The CEO refused to pay a single dad mechanic $199. 24 hours later, her father handed him 19M. The repair invoice showed only $199, but the wealthy CEO looked at the grease-covered single father with cold eyes, crumpled the paper in her hand, and walked away without paying a single dollar. She believed a poor mechanic could be ignored without consequences. The exhausted father stood silently beside the luxury sports car he had worked on through the night, unaware that within the next 24 hours, the same family would be begging to correct a mistake that would change both their lives forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness always finds its way back, and that every hard-working person deserves respect, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Beyond Kindness. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Ethan Carter had never imagined his life would become a constant battle between hope and survival. 3 years earlier, he had buried his wife after a sudden illness that drained every dollar they had ever saved. Since then, every sunrise began with the same promise. He would work harder than yesterday so his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, would never feel the weight of the sacrifices he carried alone. She believed her father could fix anything in the world because he fixed broken engines every day. Ethan never corrected her. Deep inside, he wished he could fix broken hearts just as easily. His small neighborhood garage was old, with faded paint, cracked concrete floors, and worn-out tools that had served him faithfully for over a decade. Wealthy customers rarely visited. Most of his clients were teachers, delivery drivers, retirees, and hard-working families who trusted his honesty more than expensive dealerships. Ethan charged fair prices because he knew what it felt like to count every dollar before buying groceries. One rainy afternoon, an elegant silver supercar rolled into the garage, its engine making a terrible metallic sound. The woman who stepped out wore a perfectly tailored white suit, expensive jewelry, and the confident expression of someone who had never been told no. She introduced herself only as the owner of the vehicle and demanded immediate repairs. She explained that she had an important business presentation the following morning and expected the car ready before sunrise. Ethan carefully inspected the engine and discovered the problem was surprisingly simple. A damaged sensor and loose connection had nearly caused catastrophic engine failure. He worked for hours, even after closing time, refusing to leave until every detail was perfect, while other mechanics might have replaced expensive parts and charged thousands. Ethan repaired only what was necessary. His final invoice came to just $199, barely enough to cover the labor and replacement components. When the woman returned the next morning, she barely looked at the invoice before assuming something dishonest was happening. In her mind, a small garage could never provide honest work on a $1 million car. Without asking for an explanation or inspecting the repairs, she dismissed Ethan's work as worthless. She refused to pay the bill, accused him of trying to gain attention through cheap pricing, and drove away, leaving the invoice fluttering onto the wet pavement outside the garage. Several people witnessed what happened. Ethan's young apprentice lowered his head in frustration, but Ethan quietly picked up the soaked invoice and folded it into his pocket. Anger would not buy Lily's school books or pay next month's rent. He simply returned to work, as though nothing had happened. That evening, Lily greeted him with her usual bright smile, despite noticing the sadness hidden behind his tired eyes. She proudly showed him a drawing she had made of the two of them standing beside a large garage with a shining sign that read, "Dad's Dream Auto Repair." In the corner of the picture, she had written, "One day, everyone will know how kind my dad is." Ethan smiled, but his eyes filled with tears. He hugged his daughter tightly, silently wondering how he would explain that sometimes honesty wasn't enough in a world where appearances mattered more than character. As he tucked Lily into bed, His phone buzzed with another overdue payment reminder from the landlord. His bank balance was barely enough to survive another week. The missing $199 wasn't just a repair bill anymore. It meant groceries, electricity, and Lily's upcoming school field trip. Yet even in that difficult moment, Ethan refused to hate the woman who had humiliated him. He simply hoped that someday she would understand the value of treating every person with dignity. He had no idea that, at that very moment, someone, far more powerful than the CEO, had just discovered what had happened. And by the following morning, the entire course of Ethan Carter's life would change forever. The next morning began like every other for Ethan. He unlocked the garage before sunrise, swept the dusty floor, and prepared for another long day, expecting nothing more than a few routine repairs. The memory of the unpaid invoice still lingered in his mind, but he refused to let bitterness define him. He believed that doing the right thing was valuable, even when no one seemed to notice. What Ethan didn't know was that the luxury sports car he had repaired had broken down again. Not because of his work, but because another dealership had tampered with it while trying to convince its owner that the small neighborhood mechanic had made a mistake. The CEO, Victoria Lawson, demanded an immediate investigation. She was furious, convinced she had been right all along. But the company's elderly founder, Richard Lawson, happened to overhear the discussion. Unlike his daughter, Richard had spent his youth repairing machines before building one of the country's largest automotive companies. He quietly asked to see the original repair report and the invoice from Ethan's garage. After studying every detail, he noticed something remarkable. Ethan had not only diagnosed the real problem correctly, but he had also saved the engine from catastrophic damage by refusing to replace unnecessary parts. A dishonest mechanic could have charged nearly $20,000. Ethan had charged only $199. Richard insisted on visiting the garage personally. When his black luxury sedan stopped outside, neighbors gathered in curiosity. Ethan assumed another wealthy customer had arrived, so he politely wiped his hands clean and walked over. Richard stepped out slowly, carrying a leather folder instead of anger. He looked around the humble garage, noticing the worn tools, the patched roof, and the faded family photograph hanging beside the workbench. This was a place built on hard work, rather than luxury. Richard asked Ethan to explain exactly what had happened the previous day. Ethan never insulted Victoria or exaggerated the story. He simply described the repair, admitted that he was disappointed about not being paid, and wished her well. His humility impressed Richard far more than any technical skill ever could. It reminded him of the values upon which he had built his company decades earlier. Richard then revealed something that left Ethan speechless. Years before, he had created a private investment fund designed to support honest tradespeople whose integrity deserved recognition. The fund was rarely used because finding someone truly worthy had become increasingly difficult. After reviewing Ethan's work, speaking with customers in the neighborhood, and hearing countless stories about the mechanic who often repaired vehicles for struggling families at little or no cost, Richard had made his decision. He opened the leather folder and placed a certified check on the counter. Ethan stared at the number printed across the front, convinced his exhausted eyes were playing tricks on him. It read $19,000,000. Richard explained that it was not charity or compensation. It was an investment in a man whose honesty was worth far more than money. He wanted Ethan to build modern community garages, train young mechanics, provide scholarships, and prove that integrity could still succeed in business. At that moment, Victoria arrived, expecting another argument. Instead, she found her father shaking Ethan's hand with genuine respect. The sight humbled her instantly. For the first time, she saw the man she had judged by his worn uniform and small garage for who he truly was, a hard-working father who had chosen honesty over profit. Ashamed of her actions, she sincerely apologized and admitted that she had confused wealth with character. Ethan accepted the apology without hesitation because carrying resentment had never been part of the life he wanted for his daughter. Months later, Ethan's dream had become reality. His new repair centers employed dozens of young people, offered free apprenticeships, and repaired vehicles for struggling single parents at reduced prices. The old framed drawing Lily had made now hung proudly in the entrance of the first garage. The words "Dad's Dream Auto Repair" had become a symbol of hope for an entire community. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with your friends,